It's Sunday, so welcome to the Opinionated Preacher. It's 4:35 a.m. and my dogs are jerks. It's also the venerable day of the sun, and it's supposed to be like 397 degrees Kelvin outside, so the sun god can bite me. He's a jerk too. But how are you doing today? Hopefully you got a little bit of sleep and rest and relaxation. Today I'm going to touch on some things that maybe the world, atheists, pagans, non-believers, let's just say non-believers, focus on when they might have problems with Christians and with believing God and all of that. Forgive me if I'm not jovial. As I said, 4:37 now a.m. and I've been up since 2. I went to sleep at midnight. So I'm not in the best of moods, but I'm still going to give it my best because you deserve that. But I want to start out with something, and it's a godly thing. But as I was scrolling through the tube, because there's nothing on at 3 o'clock in the morning, one of the channels that I subscribe to, God Rules, he got into this in a brief part. And I like him because he kind of goes down rabbit holes. He focuses on some odd topics and weird topics and conspiracy theories, if you will, and I like that stuff. The only problem that I have with him is he kind of circles the drain. Do you know, like a new time Christian or somebody that's just learning information for the first time, and I'm not saying that it's the first time for him, but a person is so flooded and inundated with information that they bounce all over the place, and you can tell that they're they're circling the bullseye, but they're just kind of missing it, and you kind of want to like grab them by the head and say, focus, come on, focus, look, it's right there. This guy's kind of like that. He has so much information and he sees so many things that are directly related, and he bounces from this to this to this to this, and he kind of misses the mark, but he's hitting real close to it. So I like watching him, although he's frustrating at times because you can see he's right on the verge of an epiphany, but just when he kind of gets there, he moves off real quick. But that's my opinion. And since this is the Opinionated Prepper, or more correctly, on the venerable day of the sun, the Opinionated Preacher, I'm giving my opinion. But he was talking about power of the air and frequencies and this and that and the other thing. And he started out with that map right there and talking about the air, talking about the eclipses that are coming down. And I kind of had to post a comment because he's talking about the alphabet, that it looks like an A, and the Greek letter for A. And this is what I'm talking about. He just kind of seems to miss a little bit, that if he would have gone back to an older and more significant alphabet, then he would have seen that. Because alphabet derives from the Hebrew aleph bet, or A-B, the first and the second letter. And if you look in Paleo-Hebraic, up on the left side, it's got the sideways A that's on there, which, going back, is like that. And if you go back to the meaning of the symbolism, and I know you can't really tell it, but the two little pictures right in the center are the Paleo-Hebraic. The original aleph symbol was a bull's head, and they wrote it as what we would consider a sideways A. And that was a symbol for a bull's head. That was strength and superiority and supremeness and power. And Aleph was always associated with God. Now, in other Semitic alphabets, if you will, it'd be a Canaanite bull god, but it's always been in the Semitic languages, the Aleph, the bull's head, always was representing the supreme authority and power. And if you were able to read some of that stuff, it would talk about being associated with the God-man and the symbols of the new Hebrew with a yod and a yod and a vav, and connecting the divine with the below, as above so below. It gets into a big thing, and I could not possibly explain everything, even if I had a month of hour-long sermons. There's a lot to learn about it. So please just take my word for it. Jesus refers to himself as the Alpha and the Omega, or in Hebrew and Aramaic, the Aleph and the Tav. It's a symbol for God-man. Now, if you remember, in Matthew, it refers to that. It talks about the sign of the Son of Man in the sky. Matthew 24 something 30, I believe. Son of Man, his sign appearing. Hold on, I'll see if I can't bring it up. Yep, I was right. Matthew 24:30. We'll do New International Version since it's the first that pops up. Then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and all the peoples of the earth will mourn when they see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. But what we're focusing on is the sign of the Son of Man. And I know that in classic modern day, that's kind of an oxymoron, you can't say classic and modern day. Modern day belief and classic Roman belief that directly influences modern day Christian belief, everybody thinks that it will be an appearance like Constantine saw, a cross in the sun, in the sky, because a cross is the symbol of Christ. No, the cross is the symbol that Romans gave Christ, that we adopted. But I would believe that since the symbol for God is the Aleph, the power, and the Aleph represents the man God, the Son of Man, then maybe it might be an Aleph in the sky where people are about to mourn. I'll just leave it at that. If you really want to learn about what a lot of people like myself believe is coming next year and following, and some bad things that are happening, might I suggest that you follow David Dubine and Adapt 2030. He gets into what's coming, especially starting around April 2024, and that's when the final eclipse is supposed to come through. And if I remember correctly, it's all accumulating to 2028, where it's just going to get worse and worse. And he is prophesying that people will be mourning. So, my friends, might I suggest, since this is a prepper channel, since this is a follower of the way channel, and since there are signs like that upcoming, maybe you might get read up on it and find out. But I digress. That's not what this sermon is about. I just had to bring that up because I find it interesting. I like going down rabbit holes, and when one thing comes to me, I tend to get off on a tirade, kind of like the name of the man that is overtaking all of the media with OpenAI and ChatGPT and that WorldCoin, and ushering in technology and trying to defy death and blah blah blah. Sam Altman, I don't believe that's his real name, but do a little bit of digging into what Sam could be referenced to and what the name Altman is, and you will start a rabbit hole, and I'll meet you there. But for today's sermon, I want to get into some things, some questions, some doubts, some arguments that atheists, non-believers, agnostic people, people of different religions, and even quite a few Christians may have. I'm not saying this is all of the questions. I'm saying that off the top of my head, and talking with some other non-believers, these are some of the issues and some of the things that I see reoccurring, coming up all the time. Problems they have, and what's stopping them from believing in God, and what's stopping them from giving their life to God. A lot of these questions, if you go into a modern day church and you ask a preacher, although divinity class and everything teaches how to talk and how to answer questions and how to relate to people and keep them engaged and all of that, you will be lucky if you will get a blanket answer like it's God's will, or God works in mysterious ways, or we just can't know. That's what started me on my journey, and I do not accept that. As I've said, I believe that the Lord gives us all of the information that we possibly need to answer any question. We just need to pray for divine wisdom, and we need to look. Remember, ask and ye shall receive. Holy cow, it's too early for tongue twisters. Ask and ye shall receive. Knock and it will be open. Seek and ye shall find. Only problem is, people either get blanket answers and they get turned off, or they don't really get the answer that they want to hear, so they get turned off, or they just want to sit and argue and argue and argue and argue because they don't want to admit. Remember, when you're dealing with somebody, even yourself, and they grew up believing something, it's hard to get them to turn away from that belief and admit that that belief may be wrong. There are also very traumatic things that happen in one's life, and if their faith is not firm and they have those questions and those traumatic things happen, it is very easy to blame God, and then blaming God will allow them to search out even more proof to put the blame on God, to either be angry with God to the point where you have nothing to do with Him, or to come up with evidence that God does not exist. That is our human nature. That is not God's human nature. It is our fallibility. It is our foolish wisdom. On our best day is foolish. We cannot comprehend, so we rationalize. And when bad things happen, it must be that it's a bad God, God doesn't care, or God doesn't exist. Now that may be fine for your rationalization and your reasoning, but to put it bluntly, it's stupid. Completely stupid. It's illogical. Illogical. That sounds better. Illogical. It's illogical, and you're just throwing a hissy fit. That's it. Now, to each their own. Everyone has a right to believe the way that they want to believe. But when you try to disprove God and you try to take away millions of people's belief because it doesn't fit your narrative, or it doesn't reason with your ability to lean on your wisdom. That kind of sounded confusing. I think I even confused myself. But if it just doesn't fit, just because it doesn't seem likely to you, that means that you're shrugging off and discrediting millions of people with a lot of proof, and you're not willing to look at that proof, or you're trying to discredit that proof as a lie. Well, nobody knows everything. And it could be that I'm wrong, but it could also be that these people are wrong. It could be that all of my beliefs are stories, but it could be that the world, who is the bad guy, who is pointing to chaos and destruction, are trying to plant little seeds to make it look like my beliefs are wrong, so you will follow their beliefs and get farther from your Creator. It could be that too. It ain't so fun when the rabbit's got the gun. If you are going to say I'm highly illogical, I can say the same thing to you. That's why there's no reason to argue, no reason to refute. You can discuss. You can have a debate that's good and it's healthy. But trying to win somebody to your side, especially on religion, will never work. Now, there are some people that are having a draw and a pull because they can basically see, and they want to know and they want to believe. They're being led and they're being pulled to God. But everything that they see in the world, everything that they see Christians doing, and every question that they have that they just cannot get answered is stopping them. It's blocking them. And the world is pulling them back when God is pulling them to come. He's tugging on the heartstrings. These are the people that I'm trying to talk to, and I'm trying to come across. I'm trying to relate with. Because the other people, their eyes will be closed until God opens them. When God moves and works in their heart, if He moves and works in their heart, then they will be. Remember, a Christian, a human being, cannot save anybody. When a church says, we've saved 1,000 souls, no, you haven't. You haven't saved a single one. You have not. You may have been a tool used, but you're not the one that did the saving. Stop being so cocky. Nobody can save anyone. There's only one that saves and that can save. And you need to be alert and aware to see where the Lord is leading you, for you to be a tool and a servant to help in that joyous act. But let's see if we can do it. The first one, this is a biggie, and I hear it a whole lot. Why does God allow bad things to happen? Well, you see, God allows good and evil. He does good, He allows evil. But it's not part of His plan, and He's not looking right at you or right at a person and He's saying, today I will smite thee. He's not doing that. And I don't like the answer that a lot of Christians give that, oh, it's free will. Bad people do bad things. Okay, that can explain some. But what about natural disasters? What about deaths? What about, everything that isn't an evil, wicked person's fault? Why would somebody's home be devastated from a tornado or a flood? Why would somebody lose their job and be homeless? Why would bad things happen and a child passes away? And all of that. It may not be an answer that you want to hear, but to me, this is the answer. All of this is fleeting. All of this is, I guess you can relate it to a Catholic belief of purgatory, where good and bad happens. Okay, but this is a trial. This is a fire, the world. It is a holy, consuming fire. That fire is trials and tests, tribulation. It says all throughout the Bible that God prunes you, and He preens you, and He puts you in a furnace, and all of the flaws are melted away from you, and all of the imperfections are melted away from you to leave a pure, valuable thing. All of the bad twigs and limbs and branches and leaves are pruned away, leaving the good. Now everybody, everyone, their attitude and who they are and what kind of person they are is all based on experiences in your past leading up, whether they be good or bad. And there's a carrot and a stick. Now me, myself, I find that the bad things that happen in my life, I tend to focus on and learn from more, because I don't want them to happen again. I avoid going through it again at all costs. And I've had my bad things. I've had parents die, grandparents, siblings, spouses, friends, nieces, nephews, gone through bad things, seen bad things, had bad things happen to me. But I'm not bitter because of them. I mean, I'm a jerk because of them, you know, in a worldly sense. I'm kind of a dick. But I don't blame anybody, and I thank God for those experiences. I thank God for the good people that have been in my life, and the good and the joy. But I thank God even more for the bad people that have been in my life, and the bad things that have been done to me, and the consequences I've had to pay for the bad things that I've done. I've learned from them, and it makes me a better person today. I cannot blame death on anybody, you know, so all I can do is learn from them and appreciate that I had them for a brief moment. And I also have to remember that this world is fleeting. This world passes away, and the experiences and the things that happen in this world are not the important things and the things that matter. You cry for a minute. You have a tough time for a minute. That's all. It's the end game, and it's what happens after this is all gone that's most important. And does God want to have a flawed person in the afterlife? Does God want to have somebody that has the mistakes and the attitude and the fear and the hurt? Or does God, for your sake as well, want to have the person that has triumphed through all of the trials and tribulation, and who has come out of the fire purified and refined in a more perfect creation? It's not for His benefit, it's for ours. And it's not really that God is angry with us, or that bad things happen to good people because bad people, and because of free will, and because of that Christian ideology, half-witted nonsense. I'm not saying all Christians, I'm just saying that that is the go-to answer for all of it, because they don't want to take a deeper, in-depth look. And a lot of them don't possess wisdom when it comes to that. But we'll move on to another one that's kind of a biggie, and it kind of has to do with the Big Bang and everything like that. But if God created all of everything, then who created God? Again, you're thinking with a human concept and what we can understand with our limited capabilities. I look at it as this, and I'll say this for this, and I'll get into it more later. But you take the observer theory. It shows that waves will continue to be waves in energy until it is observed or measured. And the very split second that it's looked at or there's an interaction with it, it goes from a wave to a solid particle. When that interaction is gone and the person or the measuring tool looks away, that particle becomes a wave again. I'll get into that farther down, but I look at it like that. Okay, we are the wave. We are the particle. We're going on our limited beliefs, but above us there is something outside the matrix. And when I say the matrix, I mean 4 dimensions, the space-time continuum. In our beliefs and in our physics and in our experiences, there is a start and there is an end. There is a beginning. Something has to create something else. Okay, it's all a creator. So we can't understand when Christians or anybody says that God is eternal. Well, God is outside our span of time. That's why he can see all things at once, be all. Think of our lives as floating down a river on a raft. And we have a whole bunch of friends in front of us, a whole bunch of friends behind us, and all of that. And above us, there's a helicopter. God is in that helicopter. And he can see for miles and miles and miles of the river with all of the people floating down the river, when you can only see maybe 100 foot, then there's a bend, then blah, blah, blah. He can see the beginning of the river and the end of the river because he is above, outside our experiences, looking at all of it. So when you're asking who created God, that's kind of a Gnostic teaching, for one, and I could get into it, but what's the point? I'm trying to make this basic. But when you ask who created God, God didn't have a need to be created because he is outside of all other and he created all other. It's not a matter of he just poofed into existence and he'll always be there and everything like that. No, with our concept of time and our concept of eternity and forever, we have a beginning and an end. Since he's out of that, there is no beginning, there is no end. See, so he wouldn't have had a start and a birth, and he won't have a death and an ending. He's different from us. That's basically what it is. But I go on to another one. Why would God condemn everyone who doesn't obey to an eternity in hell? Well, that you have to rack up to the power of guilt, the power of control, the power of manipulation. That is a false teaching from an era of polytheistic, pagan, converted teachers. Nowhere in the Bible there's a parable about a man being in hell. There is talk of being cast out into the outer darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth to describe certain things. But nowhere in the Bible does it say that a person is condemned to burn in hell where there will be eternal suffering. That God is a destructive jerk, meanie God, and that's not my God. My God does not punish a creation, a thing, a child of his for eternity. Does not happen. Doesn't say that anywhere in the Bible at all. And if you go back to one of my earlier lessons, I get into that a little bit more, and I get into the explanation of hell and the lake of fire and what happens at the great white throne judgment. But throw away that whole belief of burning for an eternity in hell. Now, there is something that I may not agree with completely, but the concept is right, in my opinion. You may have heard talk that when Jesus was crucified and died, the 3 days that he spent in the tomb, he spent in hell. And he took the keys to death and hell. And he was preaching to all of the people that had died before he came to earth. Okay, but the concept is about right. If you look in the Bible, it says that when Jesus returns, he will reign for 1,000 years before the influence of Satan is loosed again for a short time, for a once and for all final showdown, we'll put it. But Jesus is on earth for 1,000 years. What do you think he's doing for the 1,000 years? He's teaching. He's teaching those that are much like one of his disciples. And the main reason he had a disciple like this, doubting Thomas. Thomas had to feel the holes, feel the wounds that were in his side. Thomas could not believe unless he saw. Jesus knows that many of us are like that. He also knows that we grow up with a regional belief. If you're in India, you believe this way in these gods. Middle East, you believe this way in this God. Israel, Ireland to a certain extent, any Scandinavian to a certain extent, more back in history. You know, we get God because of Judeo-Christian forming, you know, and all of that. But other people were raised, they don't know anything about God. It's not that person's fault that they don't know. They may get divine inspiration and a pull to learn, but they may not. A person is not condemned to an eternity to burn because they were raised a certain way. Jesus is on earth, and Jesus will teach those people. And then at the great white throne judgment, they have no excuse because they heard it out of the horse's mouth. They know that all things that the Bible said and all things that Jesus said are true, and it's what happened. So if they choose not to follow him, it's out of pure wickedness and pure self. It's not out of misunderstanding, it's not out of doubt, and it's not out of ignorance. Remember, ignorance of the law is not excuse from the law. So you have to kind of think with that. But the next time you think of somebody burning in hell, not happening. That's kind of where I go into to a lot of the very false, very dangerous teachings of modern day Christianity that are based on other polytheistic, terrible false teachings, is what dissuades and turns people away. Because anybody in their right mind would think, why would I want to follow somebody that says, if you don't follow me, you're going to be burning for eternity? No, that's guilt and it's fear. And God doesn't want anybody to follow him out of guilt and out of fear. It's not a real worship, and it's not a real following. You know, so all of these people preaching about hell, tell them to go there. But I digress. Let's move on. Okay. The Bible goes against science, and science proves the Bible wrong. That is complete and utter hogwash. It is. We can get into a debate of people say, well, the earth is 6,000 years old. Well, the earth is 4.35 billion years old. Okay, one, Why does it matter? Why? Is it going to draw you closer to God? Is it going to pull you away from God? I can get into a debate on my beliefs. I could get into, well, things could have been created. It doesn't have to spring up and just be new. Another thing about God's timeline and our timeline. Another thing about it could have been created to be 4 million years old, because the concept of time does not exist for God. And it could be a scientific fact that carbon dating is very highly flawed, and scientists nowadays do not even think about using it. That could be all of the things, but I have my beliefs about it being an old earth as well. I don't dwell too much on it because it does not do me any good. It doesn't bring me closer to God. It doesn't make me a better person. It doesn't give me good works or joy. So I don't think about that stuff. There's just some things that it's not going to do any good to hunt them down and dedicate your life to knowing. Because say you do find out that it's only 6,000 years old. Say you do find out that it's 4.5 billion years old. Fantastic. Here's a cookie. That's all you're going to get from it. A cookie. That's all. You've just wasted your entire life trying to hunt something down that the information is going to do absolutely nothing for you. Just not. But you go into the Bible. We have just proven, I don't know, decades ago, around the 90s, because that's when DNA came into play, that the DNA of man is very, very similar to the DNA of a tree. Okay, in the Bible, for, let's just say 4,000 years, in the Bible, man and tree were kind of synonymous. They referred to men as trees in the Bible, the symbology. You also look, and on the predatory scale, and on more, man is very closely related to pig, almost to the point of interchangeable, using pig's organs and stuff. If you want to get into the cannibal part of it, some pretty nasty people, they call men long pig. We're both on the predatory scale, we're both about a 2 on the predatory scale. But in the Bible, men are referred to as swine all throughout it. That's where the term men are pigs came from. You have that up till 100 years ago, they couldn't figure out why they would examine a corpse and then they would go and deliver a baby, and the mother and the baby would die. And then one doctor said, from now on, we are going to start washing our hands in between examinations and surgeries, but we're not just going to dip our hands in water. We are going to have somebody pour water over our hands. He got fired, by the way, saved hundreds of lives for that one thing, and that doctor got fired because medicine just would not have it with him. But I digress. In the Bible, for 4,000 years, God talked about running water and what you should do. There are brand new scientific facts that for the split nanosecond of the Big Bang, that everything was a viscous water, a pool of like plasma and primordial ooze, just everything basic. Well, the Bible says everything that the Spirit of God hovered above the waters. It said in the beginning, it talked about waters. They just found that under the earth, in the mantle of the earth or whatnot, but below the surface of the earth, there's 2 or 3 times more water underneath the earth's surface than there is on the surface of the earth. Well, the Bible talked about the fountains of the deep springing forth, and it knew that there were waters under the earth. There's many, many things that go hand in hand like that. True Christians embrace science because science is proving God more and more every day. True believers know that science goes hand in hand because God is the very first and the supreme scientist. He created everything, he knows everything. He started all of the formulas. So saying that if you're a Christian you deny science, it's just wrong. Science is proving God. Look into quantum theories, quantum entanglement, quantum wave theory, observer theory. Look into anything with that. And I truly believe that quantum mechanics, or as Einstein says, spooky science, is proving God more and more every day. It's proving the science of God and how God created all that he created. So it's not magic and really supernatural to us anymore. It's all perfectly natural. It's all able to do. The science of miracles, the science of prayer, the science of healing, it's explained with quantum mechanics. Truly is. You should look into it. Okay, but that brings me to another. How do you know God is the right God and all the others are wrong? Okay, well, if you look at all of the others, I can get into fallen angels. I can get into how all of the other gods from every other religion that's been or will be are all basically a handful of the same entities called different names from different regions. I can get into that. But the one big thing that you have to look at and think about is all of these other religions, other than Hindu, or Buddhist, sorry, not Hindu, but Buddhist is kind of almost an outlier, but all of the other religions are inward based. They're self-based, dedicated to selfish gods that demanded our worship and that demanded that we do things for them, that we were created more or less for servants for them. Every other religion is like that. It's all inward based. If we do this to serve this kind of mean, selfish God, and if we do this and we sacrifice to this, then we get something. Christianity is the only religion that focuses outwards, that says, like I say, other than Buddhism, but Buddhism really doesn't have a God. That's why I said it's an outlier religion. But with Christianity, you focus on others. It's the act of serving others that benefits you. It's listening to the guidelines and the laws that God gave us to make us better people and let us lead longer, healthier, happier lives. Nothing benefits God. God does not get anything out of our worship, our sacrifices, our anything like that. God gave everything to us, even his own son, so we could be with him and we could be better. And he gave us the guidelines that if we love others and we put others first and we care for others and we take care of others, that in turn makes us joyous and peaceful and content, and it makes us better people. It nourishes our soul. Christianity, the Abrahamic religion, the God of the Bible, that's the only religion that does that. It's the only black sheep. So I would kind of like to think if all of these others are a selfish worship of either selfish gods that need 15, 20, 150 gods all together to do what one God can. And they demand this and they want this and they do this and it's terrible for us and we're just our little playthings, we're their playthings and all that stuff. And then we have the one outlier The Bible has also prophesied a lot that's come true. You know, it says His word will never die. Where are all of the other old gods? Where the worship is gone. You know, I can get into certain gods that are still being worshipped right below the surface, you know, but I won't. I'm just saying all of the other, you don't see people worshiping Odin and Thor. You don't see people with altars now in the open to Aphrodite or Venus, or you don't see Saturnalia and Bacchanalia happening anymore. You know, you don't see Baal, you don't see Molech, you don't see Asherah and Astarte and Ishtar. You don't see all of the worship of those gods that were so preliminary back then. They've, I don't want to say disappeared, because a lot of them haven't. We just don't hear about them. But it's transformed. God is the only one who hasn't. The same yesterday, today, and forever. But I can stop it right there. Another is Christians are hypocrites. Well, that's not the problem with God that you have. That's the problem with man and flawed man. And if you say, well, I don't want to be anything like hypocrites, and I don't want to worship a God whose followers are all hypocrites and liars and all of that stuff. Well, we'll get on semantics, because I can argue that those people really aren't followers of God, and they're in for a really rude awakening. But don't let your belief in God be dictated by despicable people, slimy, weaselly people. Don't. Look at the true Christians. Try and find them. Forget and ignore everything that the world is telling you about Christianity, because 99.99% of that worldly knowledge of Christianity is complete and utter BS, and it's hogwash. So don't even be bothered with hypocritical Christians. Don't listen to them. They're wasting your time. Another one, God is boring. Well, yeah, I guess you can, if you think that, you know, a good time is debauchery, and at one time I did too. But if you think a good time is debauchery, and you've got to be, you know, drinking and sloppy drunk, and you've got to be opening yourself up to a bunch of STDs, and you have to be causing damage and being loud and obnoxious in order to have fun, then yeah, I guess God is boring. But there's plenty of other joyous things that we do, and we enjoy the real joyous things in life, like family and friends and love and nature and beauty and all the good things. You know, here's another one, that God is a destroyer, or why did God murder so many people in the Old Testament, and blah blah blah. Well, you need to do a little bit of your homework when it comes to this, and I talked about it in another video that I made. It might be the first shall be last, possibly, I'm not sure, but there's only 3 or 4 sermon videos that I have, so go back and read a summary of it, whatever. But when he was telling his nation of Israel to completely and utterly wipe them out, it was because they were an abomination of people, and they were doing so wicked on the earth that they were going to destroy everything. Much like the flood, the people before it and the things that happened before it were destroying everything. These people were grotesquely, utterly, murderously wicked. And I believe God gave them chance after chance after chance, you know, but they didn't listen. Just about for the same reasons that God scattered his people among the nations, and God allowed them to be taken into captivity by the Babylonians and taken over and treated kind of the way that they are now. But that goes in for another story. God's not evil. He says, you know, if you follow these guidelines that I have, and you treat everyone with love and respect, and you treat yourself with love and respect, then you'll have a long, happy, peaceful life. if you start doing the abominations that hurt and maim others, physically, spiritually, mentally, that's when you start getting curses heaped upon yourself, and that's when your life becomes just rotten to the core. You cause so much devastation that you need to be taken out of the camp for the betterment of everyone else. All of these nations, they had a thing going, and they had to be wiped out because of the choices they made and the things that they did. So it's not God was a murderous God. I can get back into a thing about the origins of Yahweh, and a warrior God and stuff like that, but I won't. It's for another day. Okay, God created the devil, so there's really no such thing as free will. Nah, in a way you can say that, but it's not just the devil that you're talking about. You ask, did God create a being to be condemned? He created Lucifer as an angel, as the angel, as music minister, beautiful angel, and it was his choice to fall. Now you have to remember that God knows all things. He knows the beginning from the end, and he declares the end from the beginning. And he knew what was going to happen when he created all of this stuff. But does that mean that he doesn't create it? Because if he didn't create Lucifer because he knew what Lucifer was going to do and he was going to corrupt so many, the people that do become saved, that don't have that problem, they wouldn't exist either. And yeah, bad things wouldn't exist, bad things wouldn't happen to people, but nothing would exist at all. And all of the good and righteous and innocent souls, they wouldn't exist either. And then you get into, well, he could have created Satan to where he didn't have free will and make the bad choice to come and mess up all of us. Yes, but then he wouldn't have free will. He would have been a robot. And then in turn wouldn't have created or wouldn't have allowed evil, and then we'd all be robots. Because do you really have free will if you have a choice between vanilla and vanilla? You don't really have free will, and God doesn't want robots. He didn't want robots. But he also didn't want us to have the knowledge of good and evil, because he knows the toll that us being capable and aware of evil would have on us. So he didn't just give it to us right away. It's all part of free will, but it's also all part of his love. And he sets rules that he lives by. Because if he broke the rules, nothing would exist. And he would be evil because he's breaking rules that he set. It's righteousness. That's a matter. So, you can do that run around and that run around, but again, what's the point of it? It's Lucifer did what he did. We've done what we've done. We have a way out. And that's really basically what you need to know about that. It's free will, but it's not, because it's not that he didn't give us free will, it's that he already knows the ending of it. He knows what names are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. He knows who is going to be blotted out like fat on a spit, puffed away as if they've never existed. He knows all of this because he's created all of this. But he doesn't lead all of our lives into that area. We make those decisions. Now, you want to get on a philosophical discussion about it, you can get on a philosophical discussion, but that doesn't really have anything to do with God. That has something to do with your crisis moments. We'll put it like that. You want to reflect inwardly, and you want to attribute human circumstances to a God that's not human. Okay, but that's a waste of time. All right, and the final one. Prayer doesn't work nowadays. And why has God been silent for 2,000 years? Well, the first one I'll address, that prayer does work. It's just the majority of the prayers that are prayed are for us. They're selfish. And we don't know what's going to be good for us. We could pray for this, and then if we got it 10 or 15 minutes down the road, that could be a very dangerous thing. So that's the first part. The second part is they're very selfish. If you're saying, God, I need a $3 million house, I don't care what those evil, wicked, name it and claim it, piece of crap, false preachers are talking about. When you're saying, God, I want a $3 million house because that'll just show how good of a God you are, that's hogwash. It also says in the Bible, do not tempt God. You don't have tit for tat. You don't have quid pro quo. If you do this for me, I'll do this for you. It doesn't work that way. And maybe if we were to honestly pray for other people and pray that God's will is done in that other person's life and that the best overall thing happens, that maybe we can see our prayers going farther. When we pray, we don't pray for ourselves. God already knows what we need. We get blessed with the way that we go and the way that we act and the things that we do, but God's not a genie, not a magic lamp that you rub and you say, I need a Lamborghini right now. Oh, there must not be a God because I don't have a Lamborghini. Man, you're being petty, you're being small, and you're not being an adult. So, why do you even want to talk? When you really want to have a conversation about God, let's have a conversation. But if you get mad because you're not a quadrillionaire by now, man, get over it. God being silent for 2,000 years, well, it's not really so much that God is silent. Yeah, you don't see him doing the great things like he did getting Israel out of Egypt, and you don't see him being manifest in a pillar of fire and a pillar of smoke. Okay, but you also have to think that many of the things that God does in our lives and how he's made manifest, they are downplayed and rationalized as an abnormality or a coincidence, or this happens or that happens. There's a old movie, I can't remember, it's along the lines of The Left Behind, like in the mid 90s, early 90s. You remember when the whole Tim Leahy, I think that's his name, but the books and the movies, just everything ran with it. And then you had like Tribulation and all of the Left Behinds and Blink of an Eye and all of the Rapture stuff. Well, I think there was a scene in the movie that they were talking about God, and he said, well, if God is real, move that glass right there, come on, move it. Well, it's not happening. And the guy was saying, it wouldn't matter right now if there was an earthquake and the glass moved and it did what you told it to do, you'd blame it on the earthquake. And there was stuff like that, and then he kind of stormed off in a tizzy and he bumped into the end table and he knocked the glass of water over. So the glass of water moved. That's the symbol of it. It's just like with Gideon. It's prove to me that you're God. Make this fleece wet when everything around it is dry. Okay, but that's not good enough. Something could have happened. So tonight, I want you to keep the fleece dry when everything around it is wet. And nothing was good enough. He could always explain it away and explain it away and explain it away. Now, I'm not saying to be ignorant, and I'm also not saying that every time the wind blows, you say, oh, that's a sign from the Lord. I don't want you to do that, because there's an extreme on both sides. But you have to realize that maybe, it just may be your way of thinking if you don't see God everywhere. I personally see God out front of my house because I see trees, and so far nobody has been able to create a tree other than God. I have my grandkids, and whenever they do something foolish and makes me laugh, I see God. So God isn't silent for 2,000 years. He's speaking to us in a different way because his plans were fulfilled. The building up of his blueprint and what needed for everything to come to culmination was fulfilled 2,000 years ago. When Christ said, "It is fulfilled," he meant that there's no more going to be a pulling out of Egypt. There's no more need for another Messiah. There's no more need for prophets or anything like that. It was all formed, and the blueprint that we have for creation, life, and salvation is there. And now we are here, and we're waiting for the timeline to play out. So he's still at work. Things are still happening. We're just not really noticing it. Okay, I've talked for an hour, and it's now 5:30, and the chickens are going to need to be fed pretty soon. Hopefully you got something from this. I'm saying this. Hopefully my microphone is showing that it's on. So hopefully it picked up. If you're seeing anything on Sunday, that means that my microphone picked up and everything is working a-okay. If I do not post Sunday, it's because I have just wasted an hour and I've thrown my computer through the window. But until then, enjoy your Sunday, and God willing, we'll see you tomorrow.